What's going on, guys? And we're back with another quickfire build. This time we've got the bow. Starting with the 3 abilities for the bow, we'll be taking Poison Shot, we'll be taking Evade Shot, and we'll be taking Penetrating Shot. This is a pretty standard setup for the bow now in PvP. It's got great potential for burst, it has great potential for movement, and to be fair, the best way to play the bow is probably a little closer range than perhaps the musket, as you want to be hitting these slow arrow shots. These skills just line up quite nicely for having that sort of mid-drift range where you'll be fighting around someone rather than away from someone. So let's get into the secondary talents. So much like the rapier, we'll be filling out all the accompanying talent points in these abilities, starting with Poison Shot, which is possibly the best part about this build. It sticks on a pretty heavy dot. Infected arrows is just going to increase that damage by an extra 2% of a tick. This then just increases the damage over time, and we're not going to turn our nose up at more damage. And the next talent point, filling Poison Shot, is Direct Hit. Again, like the other talent point, it's just a flat out damage increase where you're just going to improve this ability that is already pretty strong. Next, we have Evasive Knockback. Evasive Shot causes a knockback of 2 meters. This is great for interrupting non-grit attacks. If someone's coming in towards you with a Vault Kick or a heavy attack or anything, and you use Evade Shot and you knock them back, it can actually interrupt them and push them back away from you. It's obviously a good way of moving away from someone. It's obviously good at dodging other, like, sweeping attacks. It overall just adds a little bit more close range survivability and control when using the bow. The next talent point, go to Distance. Your Evade Shot grants you 5 seconds of 15% haste. So you'll just move 15% faster after this, coinciding with this being an evasive movement and giving the bow overall more mobility. You'll find out that the bow is less of a ranged weapon and more of a mid weapon where you'll be dancing around people and actually killing them from a closer range rather than a further, and these little bits of haste with especially with Evade Shot is really helpful. Blood-Soaked Arrows increases the damage by 10% after each hit to a max of 50% damage if it travels through all 5 people. You don't really take this talent point for its strength, but it is quite good when you're fighting in multiple situations. It's actually really nice against mobs and stuff in the world as well if you line it up correctly, and it looks fun and it does a lot of damage when you pass through a lot of heads. But we're using this mostly to get to the next talent point, which is Deep Strike. So the Penetrating Shot deals 20% more damage when targets are 20 meters or more away. I'd say 20 meters is possibly the max range that you'll ever want to fight with the bow. So this just straight up buffs the damage. If you're trying to get someone who's running away and you actually get good with Penetrating Strike and you can hit off some good headshots from afar, this is just going to straight up buff that damage. There wasn't that many more talent points from the actual bow itself that were much more used than this. It is just a nice quality of life for if you do actually have to fight at range. Now on to the rest of the filler talent points, and I'll work down them in tiers as per usual. In the Skirmisher tree, we have Evasive Tactics. After you dodge, you deal 20% more damage for 5 seconds. Now, this is one of the more tactical spells in this build. You can get it close to 100% uptime if you really work around it. Much like the Evasive Maneuvers tactic in the Spear, if you learn to play around this talent, it will just buff your damage tenfold. It's really good in mass PvP situations because you're not going to be focused all the time. You can just focus on keeping that buff up by dodging and then lashing in arrows and actually taking a few heads with it. The next talent point is Catch Me If You Can. If you're surrounded by 3 or more enemies, you gain a 20% speed buff. So this is just a straight up speed boost for if you're getting absolutely murked with the bow. People are going to want to come after you. They're going to assume you're squishy. They're going to want to stop you from fighting at range. This just helps with all the other haste in this build to stack up and just get away from people, and you'll have some great kiting ability, especially if 3 people are trying to chase you down. To back that up as well, in the Skirmisher tree we've got Dodge and Weave. When you dodge, you'll gain 10% haste for 2 seconds. This just synergizes nicely with Evasive Tactics as well, just because you're going to be dodging quite a lot, and especially if someone's up close to you, you're going to be dodging a lot. So having the extra 10% haste is always helpful, even if it is only for 2 seconds. We also have Archer Speed, which means you gain 10% haste for 5 seconds when you swap to your bow. This has a 10-second cooldown, but again, this is just a little bit of a speed boost, giving that high mobility to the bow, and this just helps keeping you in that mid-range, away from the melee and close enough to the other ranged players to cause problems. The next point, Battle Precision. Debuffs and damage over time durations last 20% longer. This just straight up buffs your Poison Shot to be 22 seconds, so you're gaining 2 more ticks of that super damage. And then the next talent point after that, Mark. You deal 10% more damage to foes suffering from a debuff. This just means that when you've got Poison Shot on the target, you're just going to do 10% more damage to them. Moving over to the Hunter tree, we've got long range, so that you deal 20% more damage to foes that are at least 10 meters away. 10 meters is a great zone to be in for the bow. If you can get used to being 10 to 25 meters, you're going to deal a lot of damage and you're going to be really tricky to pin down. There will be some people out there who'll be able to master this and master the absolute zone that you need to be in. And if I decide to use the bow myself again, I'll try and figure out this kind of dead zone and we'll do a little video on that as well. The next talent point is finishing shot. If target's below 50% health, you deal 20% more damage. This is just more execute potential. It helps with those long range penetrating strikes that you might hit when they're running away. If they're less than 50% health and you're more than 20 meters away and you dodge and fire a penetrating strike and can hit them in the head, you're going to do a massive chunk of damage. You might even finish them off. So the next talent point, arrow range, was the best of the two talent points that were a bit meh. I didn't like surprise attack. If you haven't damaged the foe within the last 10 seconds, you gain 20% extra damage. Yeah, it could be good for that first initial shot, but sometimes people do go out of your range and you do need to be able to hit a little bit further than you can initially. So I think arrow range just gives you a little bit more leeway in terms of doing some range damage, especially as it's so easy to run away in this game. So if you're using the bow, you're not likely going to be using a musket at the same time. Maybe you are going to use both, then great, that's cool. You can fight with the bow up close and then the musket at range. But this just covers you a little bit more distance so that you can get a little bit more flight time. You don't have to judge those arrow distances. But like I said, this was more to pave the way to the next talent point, which is bullseye. Your bullseye increases your bow critical strike chance by 10%. Pretty simple. It's there as it says on the tin. Now you might notice that there are some points missing from this tree that perhaps you might want to include. I don't really like using heavy shots with the bow. I want it to be more quick. I want it to be more nimble. Like I said, this is kind of like a mid-range weapon that I'm using. And you might be thinking there is one big talent point missing from this bow build, and that I haven't taken any of the final bow abilities, but actually both of them are pretty rubbish. Concussion I'm not even going to talk about. If anything, that's a PvE talent. It's not even that good because you can just buy arrows for cheap. And then we have knee shot, which on paper sounds like it should be mandatory in this build. I actually thought it would be at first, but then I realized hitting leg shots is actually almost as hard as hitting headshots when people are running. The desync and from range, it's kind of difficult to judge. Most of the time I want to be aiming for the upper chest / neck area so that I can possibly get headshots as well. Knee shot was a hard one to include in this build purely because it's slow at 10% is actually really rubbish, especially for 2 seconds. That's going to make absolutely no difference whatsoever. I believe it used to be 50% for 4 seconds, which is so much better than this, but I think it was probably a little bit too powerful. I would probably like to see it 25% to be more in line with the hatchet slow, to be more in line with the ice gauntlet slows. I think it's a nice trade-off to have a 25% slow for maybe 4 seconds, even 3 seconds, because you have to sacrifice hitting possible headshots to actually do this. So for that reason, I'm not including this in the build because I don't think the slow is worth it at all. I think what you want to be doing is just dancing around them at that mid-range and just piling arrows into their chest and or head if you can. So that's going to tangent on into the playstyles. I feel like I've already gone over the playstyle of the bow. Like I said, you want to get yourself in that kind of dead zone, 10 to 25 meters away. You don't want to be using this obviously as a melee weapon, but you do want to be still close up and fighting so you can make sure that every single one of those arrow heads hit. The problem with the bow is the arrows are very, very easy to dodge. At range, the enemies don't even need to dodge the arrows. They can just see it coming and move to the side. Whereas if they're up close, they have to use their dodges to try and get close to you. And in that time, you can either use to get away with the speed of this bow build, use your burst when they get up close so you do a big chunk of damage, and then start killing them with whatever weapon you're accompanying the bow with, such as the spear, such as the rapier, whatever, the hatchet. You might even couple it with the ice gauntlet if you wanted to just slow them down and run away and then just keep damaging them like that. If you really wanted to be this high class bow main, you could just use the ice gauntlet for the slows and for the crystallize. It's always nice to have like an ice block or an invulnerability. You could use this with the hatchet, I guess, with the defy death, the berserking to get away from people. You could even use the thrown stuff to use for more slows. Like I said, with knee shot, it's not actually worth it, but you do have the social distancing, which would actually be really good. You've got evade shot already. I'm sure there will be some people out there who can master the bow from range and they can tell you how good it is from range at that point, but personally I don't think the bow should be used like that. Personally, for me, myself, it works better when I'm up close, so I can make sure I hit those poison shots. I can make sure I hit those penetrating shots straight after and do like a burst combo between the two of them. I actually found it quite nice to use piercing shot into poison shot so that I make sure that I actually hit them and hurt them and it deals a big chunk of damage, and then sometimes I'll end up then just using my evade shot just to try and pump in a little bit of extra, and then you just circle around them, dodging and firing arrows into them and hoping for those headshots, especially if you aim for the neck. That's probably my biggest thing to say, that with the bow, if you aim for the neck region, there's more than likely you might get headshots. I've played a lot of FPS games myself, so I have natural crosshair placements. When I'm in the sweet spot range, I can hit decent headshots. I think the bow could benefit from possibly having a faster projectile, which would make it a little bit stronger, but overall I don't think the bow is actually overly strong in some situations, especially if you're against someone who is a decent player. So I'm trying to add a little bit more information to the end of these guides. I know I usually say, what would I couple with the bow? I think I've already kind of gone through that, saying that the hatchet might be good. The ice gauntlet could be fun with it. The spear definitely works with it, and that's what I've been using quite a bit myself. The rapier is definitely going to be good with it as well. So anything that's good close range melee that can help protect you as well as control the enemy. I think dex builds are very much like that. But I just wanted to mention that I would definitely use at least medium armor. I wouldn't bother going for heavy armor. I think that light armor would be the best personally on this, because you'll have even more mobility. You'll have even more damage. If you play this right, you shouldn't really get hit or locked down. Right now, I'm rolling with about 50 constitution and the rest is going into dex, and I'm altering my points as I go along to suit that. But as for gear pieces, I'm just looking for high dex with bow abilities, preferably with headshot multipliers, and I'm trying to hit those close range headshots and just fire them off, and then basically use the bow as an evasion weapon while dealing in range damage. But I personally find the bow easy to counter myself, but maybe I've never found someone who's super cracked at using it. So how would I build this while leveling? I'd first go for penetrating shot, move back over, pick up evade shot, evasive knockback, poison shot, infected arrows, direct hit, battle precision, mark. I'll then pick up evasive tactics for the damage buff, move back over to the hunter tree, pick up blood soaked arrow, deep strike, the arrow range, bullseye, long range, finishing shot. Then we pick up some more of the movement talents. We'll start with dodge and weave, we'll get go to distance, archer speed, and finally landing on catch me if you can. And that wraps up the bow video, guys. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for all the support and likes and everything. Last thing I want to say, as always, is have a good evening, good afternoon, good morning, good day, whatever you're doing. Stay happy, stay healthy, and I'll catch you in the next video. Whee!